My Life Cliched comments, great channel friend. I have subscribed as both branding and content are my interests. Hey. I'm thinking of buying the Canon R10 for my content and was wondering your thoughts between this and the 90D, as I'm a bit concerned the smaller and lighter body of the R10 will have more rolling shutter, wobble effect, and overheating when it comes to longer shoots. Also, saw worse low light ISO compared to competitors like the Nikon Z30 and E10. Okay, so I'm going to put it really simply here. The Canon 90D is here, the Canon M6 Mark II is here, and the Canon R10 is here. The Canon R10 is hands down better than both the Canon 90D and the EOS M6 Mark II. You're not gonna get overheating, you can charge it while operating. Ergonomically, it's great. It has a viewfinder if you're looking for that. It has a flip out screen as opposed to a flip up screen. And you have the option of both standard recording quality in 4K and high quality recording 4K. I don't know anything about the Nikon. I don't shoot on Nikon, never have shot on Nikon. I do not see myself in the foreseeable future shooting on Nikon, so can't really help you there. For starters, the Canon 90D, for anybody else watching that doesn't know, is a DSLR body, and so ergonomically, it's gonna fit better in the hand. It's a bigger body. There's a mirror inside it, unlike something like the Canon EOS M6 Mark II or the Canon R10. Those are both mirrorless cameras. So that's the key difference. The 90D and the M6 Mark II are both the same sensor. So whatever pros and cons exist on the 90D will also exist on the EOS M6 Mark II. The difference between the EOS M6 Mark II and the 90D is that the 90D will have less overheating issues during video, most likely, because of the design of the body and for the dissipation of heat. The M6 Mark II essentially takes the technology of the 90D and compresses it into this tiny little body. And so whenever you're shooting in 4K, for example, after about 40 minutes or so of recording, the camera will overheat and shut down. And then you're gonna have to change your recording mode down to something like 1080p in order to continue recording, but then you'll still have the same 30-minute record limit, which exists on both the 90D and the EOS M6 Mark II. So, and change the battery pack. If you're running just off a battery, I believe the 90D uses a bigger battery and therefore most likely will give you longer battery life, especially in video, when compared to the M6 Mark II. I just had to switch out a battery just now because I'm powering it through battery. The Canon R10, although uses the same battery as the M6 Mark II, and yes, it does not last as long as it does on the M6 Mark II, which is not that long. However, you can plug in the camera via USB-C and charge it that way. And so while operating it and recording it, so therefore it's almost as if it's being powered like it's being plugged into a wall outlet, which is awesome. And so I can't really do that right here, right now, but I would be able to do that. I'm right here, I'm recording this right now on the M6 Mark II, which is essentially my travel go-to camera coming at you from Dallas, Texas. I'm up here for work. But so that's one of the key differences there. Now, in regards to one of the other major factors, 90D compared to the M6 Mark II, compared to the R10, the autofocus capability is the best in the R10, the worst in the 90D. Although the 90D and the M6 Mark II have the same sensor, and the 90D also has some extra video features, the M6 Mark II has newer, better dual pixel autofocus than the 90D, but the R10 also has the newer processor and better autofocusing system than both of those cameras. With regards to overheating, I have not experienced any overheating with the R10. I've run it continuously and it's worked just fine. So whereas with the M6 Mark II, it does overheat, clearly, especially in 4K. Now, you asked about rolling shutter and wobble. So a couple things to note. So the 90D with regards to video quality is not that good. And the reason is that it's in most cases, a lot of video cameras, what they'll do is they'll oversample the footage. So if you have something like 32 megapixels, that's the equivalent of like 7K. If you have 24 megapixels, that's the equivalent of like 6K. And so a Sony camera, for example, like the ZV-E10, will oversample the footage. It will take that 24 megapixel image, it will squeeze it down into 4K, like take that 6K resolution and squeeze it into a 4K image, and thus giving you really sharp 4K. The Canon R10 does the same thing. It takes the 24 megapixel image, that 6K image, squeezes it down, and gives you really sharp 4K. The Canon 90D and the Canon M6 Mark II don't do that. What they do is they do something called pixel binning. It's basically from a 7K image, it's essentially taking almost every other pixel, and then the resulting image ends up being like a 3.2K image, and then it upscales that to 4K. So your image is essentially not that sharp, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because when you're doing portraits and things like that, in the case of video, if there's any blemishes and whatnot, they might actually get softened up. It gives you kind of like a fake beauty filter. Whereas in the R10 will give you a sharp 24 megapixel image, and it'll squeeze it down to a clear, crisp 4K. Now, when it comes to rolling shutter, the Canon M6 Mark II, its sensor readout speed is about 17 milliseconds. So that's how fast the image essentially refreshes itself. So if you were to whip the camera left and right, so if I were to do that on something like this, right? Oopsie, hold on a second. There you go. So if I were to go like this, right? In terms of whatever rolling shutter that you would get, it's essentially reading this at 17, there you go. It's reading this at 17 milliseconds. The ZV-E10, for example, from Sony, at 4K, 24 frames per second, you're getting a sensor readout speed of about 33 milliseconds, more than doubles the display. That's why you get a lot of jello on Sony cameras. At 30p, it comes down to about 27 milliseconds. But if you record footage at 1080p, because there's less data, the sensor readout speed has to be a little bit faster as well. But when it comes to things like the Canon R10, there's two sets of rolling shutter or sensor readout speeds that you can be aware of. Number one is there's the I forgot what it is, whether it's IPB or standard or whichever one it is, but there's a high quality mode and then there's a standard quality mode. The standard quality mode on the Canon R10 is similar to whatever the standard quality is on both the M6 Mark II as well as the 90D. And when you're recording the standard quality, which in which case it's taking every other pixel, bringing it down to like a less than 4K image and then upscaling it, giving you it gives you faster readout speed. And on the R10 and both the R7 as well, you get a sensor readout speed of 14.6 milliseconds, so even faster than the M6 Mark II. So what you just saw when I did this, right? If you do notice any jello, it'll be less so than it'll be less so pronounced on something like the Canon R10 or R7 if you're recording in standard quality. However, if you record in 4K HQ, which is the high quality version, because you're dealing with more information, a 6K image, or in the case of the R7, a 7K image, 32 megapixels, and you're squeezing it down, then obviously the sensor readout speed is going to slow down a little bit, and from what I've read here, it's 29 milliseconds. So there's going to be some noticeable rolling shutter in certain instances, right? Same thing with the ZV-E10, the rolling shutter, you'll see it in certain instances. Those instances being like if you're doing whip pans, but more so in a situation where you're using a telephoto lens and you're hand holding, right? So if you've got like a 70 to 200 millimeter or an 80 to 200, one of those telephoto zooms, or even like 135 millimeter or 85 millimeter prime, or even 50 millimeter prime, and you're hand holding it, or if you have like a 35 mil or a 24 mil and you're like vlog holding it like this, and then you got all of these like shakes and stuff, those shakes will only be further exacerbated by the rolling shutter, so you're gonna get a lot of the jello. But if you've got your camera on some sort of tripod or something like that, it's not gonna really matter. And if you're stabilizing the footage through gyro flow with an attached Insta360 or a GoPro or something like that, or Runcam Orange, then you can minimize or almost nearly eliminate or to correct for the rolling shutter. So that's something to kind of consider and to keep in mind. So in summary, so in short, I'll probably put this in the front of in the beginning of the video, the Canon R10 is hands down better than both the Canon 90D and the EOS M6 Mark II. You're not gonna get overheating. You can charge it while operating. Ergonomically, it's great. It has a viewfinder if you're looking for that. It has a flip out screen as opposed to a flip up screen. And you have the option of both standard recording quality in 4K and high quality recording 4K. The difference being that you can take oversampled footage, squeeze it down. There's going to be some rolling shutter in that, but if you don't want the rolling shutter, you can go to standard quality, which is the same quality as both the M6 Mark II and the Canon 90D, but the sensor readout speed is actually faster than both of them, so therefore you're going to have technically less rolling shutter in that. However, when it comes to low light, in comparison to both Nikon and the ZV-E10, I don't know about Nikon, I don't use Nikon, but when it comes to ZV-E10, you will get, in my opinion, better low light performance on the Canon camera, not just the Canon R10, but also the ZV-E10. Not just the Canon R10, but also the M6 Mark II and the 90D over the Sony ZV-E10, just by virtue of the fact that the ZV-E10 does not allow you to disable the muddy noise reduction that it has. But other than that, I believe the ZV-E10 is probably the better camera in all other factors with regards to video, right? It has picture profiles, it has S-Log, it has HLG, it has unlimited record times, but ergonomically the R10 is better than the ZV-E10. I believe in low light, in my opinion, it does better. Yeah, I think that's it in regards to if you're deciding between the 90D or the M6 Mark II and the R10, get the R10. It's better than the older versions of the Canon in almost every way. The R10 also has the RF mount, which is both backward compatible with a Canon adapter or even any third-party adapter for EF lenses with full-on autofocus. And yeah. I hope that answers your questions. Let me know if you have any more questions in the comments below. I'll see you soon.